Fox News cancels popular show host Lou Dobbs. Joe Biden says that former President Trump should not receive intelligence briefings. Plus, we'll hear from our special guest, Newsmax primetime host, Grant Stinchfield. All that and more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is Saturday Live Stream.
God bless the United States of America.
All right, friends, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday with the great group that we have. All of those folks already in the chat. Thank you for showing up. A shout out already to our moderators, Steel for Real, Marjorie, LD. Thanks for helping out while I'm trying to run the show here along with Beth, our producer. We're going to start with what is going on at Fox News, folks, because you have to wonder what happens next, because they just abruptly canceled Lou Dobbs, one of their most popular show hosts. The Lou Dobbs Tonight show is gone. And you have to wonder that Lou Dobbs was one of the most pro-Trump supporters out there. And here's the story. Fox News has canceled Lou Dobbs Tonight, the program hosted by one of the media's most steadfast supporters of Donald Trump and the former president's claims of voter fraud, the Los Angeles Times reported Friday. Dobbs' program, which has been airing twice nightly at 5 and 7 p.m. Eastern Time, on the Fox Business Network, will be replaced next week with Fox Business Tonight, with rotating substitute hosts Jackie DeAngelis and David Asman, who filled in for Dobbs on Friday. This, according to a Fox rep who confirmed the news to the Times. Folks, this is big news, and it kind of goes along with what conservatives have been thinking for a while now. This slow and steady push to the left. I mean, look at who's over at Fox News. You've got Juan Williams. You've got Chris Wallace. Then they bring in Donna Brazile. And on the other side, look at what's happening. Like Judge Jeanine, she was put on leave for a while. And then, of course, you have Lou Dobbs, whose show now is canceled. And here's more. Fox News has been in turmoil as longtime viewers have abandoned the channel since Election Day. Former President Donald Trump has attributed his election loss to Joe Biden to unfair coverage by Fox News, as well as massive voter fraud. Dobbs was signed to Fox News by its former chief executive, Roger Ailes, in 2011. As the Times noted, he has long been the company's most outspoken supporter of Trump's economic and immigration policies. In the weeks after the election, the paper said, he went on to express anger that the Republican Party did not do more to act on claims that the election was rigged in favor of Biden. So this firing is just going to fire up conservatives even more. Because like I said, we've seen this push to the left. And a perfect example, folks, is the commentary following and during Joe Biden's inaugural address. I mean, did you watch the inauguration? Did you see what Joe Biden, did you listen to what he was saying? I mean, it was probably, in my opinion, one of the most forgettable inaugural addresses that I've ever seen. He ticked all the boxes, went through and hit all of his left-wing pander groups that he needed to pander to, called for unity while still, blasting conservatives. But at Fox News, here is how Chris Wallace described it.
Martha, I thought it was a great speech. I've been listening to these inaugural addresses since 1961, John F. Kennedy, Ask Not. I thought this was the best inaugural address I ever heard. He talked about white supremacy, domestic terrorism. He said we must confront it, we will defeat it. I think it was less an inaugural address and more part sermon, part pep talk, talking directly to the American people, saying, hear me out. We have a right to dissent peacefully, but our disagreement must not lead to disunion.
Are you kidding me here? Part pep talk, part sermon. That is how Chris Wallace, the best inaugural address he ever heard. And then this part about disagreement can't lead to disunion. Let's just step back in time to the summer, folks. I mean, in Antifa, riots and looting and vandalism and assault. People were getting hurt. Statues were being toppled. Businesses burned to the ground. And no Democrats, including Joe Biden, said anything about it. His first words came at the Democrat National Convention after they did some polling and said, you know what, maybe you should speak out about this. But nothing was done. Oh, but as Chris Wallace points out, he's going to battle white supremacy because that's just what everybody is concerned about, even though we had this whole summer of riots and looting and vandalism. It's absolutely nuts But when you have comments like that, when you have comments from other hosts, like during the post-election coverage, where they only painted one side of the story, where they never brought these people in with these election claims to talk about it, signed affidavits, these affiants weren't interviewed, always biased, always one-sided. And guess what? They are taking a hit. The ratings are coming out, and it shows Fox News is taking a massive hit. And it's because partly people are burned out on politics, but more importantly, people are burned out at Fox News. And here's more. Fox News has been the top-rated cable network in primetime since July 2016. Not coincidentally, Donald Trump became the Republican presidential nominee. December 2020 marked the 54th consecutive month of being the cable's top-rated network. The streak ended the following month. In addition, the streak as the most watched cable news network also ended. In January 2021, CNN was the top-rated cable news network and cable network overall in primetime. MSNBC also averaged more viewers in January 2021 than Fox News. The last time Fox News ranked third among cable news networks in primetime for an entire month was September 1999. Wow. Over 20 years, folks, Fox News has been on top, or at least not ranked at the bottom. They just broke an over 20-year streak, ranking below MSNBC and CNN. Think about that. Fox News has to get their act together. I mean, what they are doing is clearly not the right direction. And I'd love for you to jump in the comments after the show. Let your thoughts be heard in the live chat. I'd love the participation. And then after the show, let me know in the comments what you think. What is this direction of Fox News? What direction are they going? And why are they doing it? What is the purpose? So next, we're going to talk about Joe Biden. But first, if you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And when you do, please hit that bell so you'll be notified. We're making our push for 150,000 subscribers, and we can do it with your help. All right, now I got to talk about Joe Biden because he had a sit-down interview with Norah O'Donnell over at CBS News, one-on-one. They're all hyping this up. And you know what it's going to be? It's going to be this fluff piece, no hard questions at all, unlike when Leslie Stahl interviewed President Trump, and it was back and forth, back and forth. Now, this is a new age. This is Joe Biden, but some really interesting points came out, points that Joe Biden made. And I say it's interesting because we all know what Joe Biden is, who he is, and what he does. He gaffes all the time. He can't remember what he's doing, what he's saying. Here's just one example.
Want to get rid of bad cops as much as bad lawyers want to get rid of good lawyers want to get rid of bad lawyers and doxing. But violence is never acceptable. That's what the one thing we got to communicate. John, look, the whole notion of what's going on here is we cannot have an excuse.
Okay, so who's John? I mean, Joe Biden doesn't even know. And I brought up that example because the point that he talks about with Norah O'Donnell is he doesn't want President Trump to have intelligence briefings because he might slip up and say something stupid. Joe Biden, who doesn't even know most times who he's talking to in his interviews, that's what he's saying about President Trump. All right, so let's get to the interview. Norah O'Donnell is talking to him. And first she asks about the Senate impeachment trial. And if Joe Biden, if he were still in the Senate, would he vote to convict former President Trump? And here's Biden.
Look, I ran like hell to defeat him because I thought he was unfit to be president. I've watched what everybody else watched, what happened when that crew invaded the United States Congress. But I'm not in the Senate now. I'll let the Senate make that decision.
So he'll let the Senate make that decision. He's punting. He's not going to give his opinion on what he'd do as a senator. But here's the thing. He's already made his voice known and his opinion quite clear when he says that impeachment is necessary. He actually said it's needed for unity. That's what Joe Biden says, that impeachment is needed for unity. So I think it's quite clear where he stands. So then O'Donnell moved on to the intelligence briefings. And if Joe Biden favored or supported President Trump, as former presidents have done, if he should receive these intelligence briefings. And here's Biden.
I think not.
Why not?
Because of his erratic behavior unrelated to the insurrection.
I mean, you've called him an existential threat. You've called him dangerous. You've called him reckless.
Yeah, I have, and I believe it.
What's your worst fear if he continues to get these intelligence briefings?
I'd rather not speculate out loud. I just think that there is no need for him to have that intelligence briefing. What value is giving him an intelligence briefing? What impact does he have at all, other than the fact he might slip and say something?
Well, you know what my worst fear is? My worst fear is that Joe Biden receives the intelligence briefings because he might slip up and say something ridiculous. I mean, that comment, when you think about it, is just so hilarious. Time and time again, he couldn't even remember the words to the Declaration of Independence. And now he's worried about President Trump, Donald Trump, slipping up and saying something. This, folks, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see more and more of this over the next 4 years, these fluff interviews, no hard-hitting questions. Again, I just take you back to any sit-down interview that President Trump ever did, or the press briefings that Kayleigh McEnany did, the hostile press, the hostile media. Now they're all for Joe Biden, and they ask him questions like this, all directed about President Trump. That's not hard-hitting. What's your opinion on the Senate impeachment trial? What's your opinion on the intelligence briefings? It's absolutely ridiculous, but they can't really press him in the interview because I really think it would be too much for him. I really think that if he were pressed on issues and had to think on his feet, that's not something scripted or something basic like how do you feel about this, then he'd slip up and it would reveal just how fragile our presidency is at this very moment. But that's Joe Biden actually saying that he's afraid President Trump will slip up if he gets the intelligence briefings. All right, so that brings us to our special guest. I'm really excited about this, folks. I love it when we have guests on the show, and I'm really looking forward to talking to him. He's from Newsmax, good friend of mine, former investigative reporter, former congressional candidate, and now he's the man on Newsmax. He's hosting his own show, Stinchfield, on Newsmax. Grant Stinchfield, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, it's always great to be with you, Bobby. Usually you're a guest on my show, so it's great to be the other way around here.
Yeah, it's a good turnabout. But hey, with that intro, this little mini bio I said, one of the things that struck me was investigative reporter. What does that even mean? Because I don't think I've seen that in like the last, decade or something. What does an investigative reporter do?
Because you haven't seen it is why I don't do it anymore. I left mainstream television in 2011, and for 20 years, basically from Hartford, Connecticut, Dallas, Texas, New York City, and other cities in between there, I was an investigative reporter for the NBC owned and operated stations group, which means I worked in local news, like you see it at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, depending on what part of the country you live in. And I did exposés on waste, fraud, abuse, crimes, cold cases. You see, I got a couple Emmys back there behind me, 4 of them to my name, though I now say they're useless. If they're giving Andrew Cuomo Emmys, mine are basically worth nothing.
Oh, no, right. Yeah, I know that kind of diminishes it, but dude, I think that is so cool. So what do you feel about this? Where you've seen the media, especially during the Trump administration, there were so many things that could have been legitimately investigated, and they just push a left-wing narrative. How does that affect you coming from that background?
Well, clearly the mainstream media is biased, and it's a liberal bias that has just infiltrated the media to the point where the left and Democrats in particular have weaponized the media against anybody that thinks differently than they do. We saw that with President Trump and the persecution of him. We're seeing it right now with the persecution of Newsmax. I mean, you have outlets now that are literally calling for us to be deplatformed from cable and satellite providers off of Apple TV and Roku and things like that. Why? Because we offer a different opinion than they do. Now, last I checked, Bobby, I never called for the deplatforming of Rachel Maddow, and I certainly think she lies every night on her program. I like to say we deal in truth. She's lying all the time. But yet, I've never called for her to be deplatformed because we have something in this country called the First Amendment, and I respect it. And that's freedom of speech. And, it sounds corny, but that old saying is, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll fight for your right to say it. The left clearly doesn't agree with those kinds of things. So we've seen the downfall of the mainstream media. It's allowed outlets like this to rise up. And truthfully, Bobby, what you're doing, it's allowed people like you as well. I mean, call them citizen journalists, whatever you want to say. But with technology today, you don't need to go to NBC, CBS, CNN to get your messaging. You just don't need it anymore.
Right. Well, what about that? You're talking about this deplatforming and they were saying Trump supporters need to be sent to these re-education camps or deprogramming. This escalation, was it something that you saw or did it even surprise you? Because I mean, going into the home stretch of the election, I talked about it on my show. It was an unprecedented jump for big tech in the media to, block Hunter Biden stories and block people on Twitter, just flat out banning them and blocking them. And now that Trump's out of there, it's ramped up. Like you said, getting rid of Newsmax. That's what people are calling for. I mean, what's next? What do you think's down the line?
Well, as long as you allow people to enact in bad behavior, illegal behavior, unconstitutional behavior, it's going to proliferate. We see it with violence across America. When the left coddles criminals, what happens? The violence explodes. I can go all the way back to the 1990s, and I can tell you the media was biased. I worked in media then all the way through till 2011 for mainstream media. There was always this liberal flair. Newsrooms across the country. Constantly, I was battling, hey, you may want to take a different approach to this story. You may want to think about this, that they just can't wrap their brains around. But as you mentioned, with the election, November 3rd, and leading up to it, and some could say the moment President Trump came down the escalator 4 years ago, the attacks on conservatives, on the president, on anybody with a different way of thinking has gotten to the point where I think it's criminal. It's certainly immoral, and in many respects, it's unconstitutional with some of the things that they want to do with silencing us.
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes into the silencing, the cancel culture. On your show the other day, you were talking about this. I brought this up too. This contrast between Simon & Schuster, blocking, canceling Josh Hawley's book, but then there's a Hunter Biden book. I want to put this up on the screen. This is something that you put on your Twitter feed. It's the review or some kind of endorsement by Stephen King. I just want people to read this. It says, Biden remembers it all and tells it all with a bravery that is both heartbreaking and quite gorgeous. He starts with a question. Where's Hunter? The answer is he's in his book, The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful. And that's Stephen King. What in the world's going on, man? Josh Hawley can't put a book out, but Hunter Biden, he's good to go.
Clearly, it's going to be a work of fiction. He's saying the good and the beautiful. I don't know what's beautiful about Hunter Biden. We had joked on the show. I had a whole bunch of chapters for him. If he wants me to read the book, here's the chapters I want. I want how to profit off your family name. That should be the first chapter in the Hunter Biden book. What to do if your billionaire business partner goes missing. We all need to know what to do under that. And, the list goes on. We can come up with tons.
Right. Well, yeah, and so this cancel culture is just outrageous. And again, I think the left has been emboldened because they saw what happened post-election. We tried to fight these election fraud and election law violations, which have never been taken up. Those ultimately need to be heard by the Supreme Court, and they punted. But going through all that, it was a crazy time. President Trump was out there rallying. I just want to play this video real quick for our fans because while they were contesting the election, you hadn't had the Georgia runoffs yet. President Trump's, he's in Georgia. I'm watching this. You're watching this. And this is what President Trump says.
It's a disgrace that in 2020, no state in America even makes any real attempt to verify that those who cast ballots by mail are eligible and lawfully registered voters. The evidence of fraud is overwhelming. And again, I'm going to ask you to look up at that very, very powerful and very expensive screen. I do this for a few people. Let's go.
We certainly want transparency. What he saw is what we revealed to you last night on this program, what appears to be Atlanta, Georgia ballot counters being told to leave the counting room. Then a short time later, with no observers, with no media, hidden cases of possible ballots are rolled out from under a table.
All right, so that's the Georgia rally, and that voice sounds very familiar to yours. Let me put this up on the screen. This is what people saw at the rally. There he is, Grant Stinchfield, and I got to just tell the viewers at home this, okay? I was watching this. I texted Grant right away as this going on. Now, I'm not going to reveal the contents of what I texted, but anyone who knows me knows I'm hyper-competitive and equally immature. So it was. So, but no, but seriously, I'm
Well,
really proud of you, man.
Let me tell you something, Bobby. You were the only one texting me. I was sitting there. All of a sudden, I start hearing the phone go off. And in fact, a buddy of mine has a surveillance camera in his kitchen. And we were sitting there. I was having a vodka. I think it was like a Friday night, maybe Saturday night. And we're sitting there having a vodka. And all of a sudden, I hear my voice just like that. I go, what? And the surveillance camera, we watch it. You know, I'm shocked that I'm at the president's rally. And he's sitting there watching me.
Right.
The president of the free world, leader of the free world, watching me for 4 minutes. But on the surveillance video, you could hear my phone vibrating, just going off because everybody's texting me. It was obviously a huge thrill, but you know the point of that and what he played about my story was, you know, we all remember the ballots coming out from under the table. I don't know if there's a legitimate reason why they were there. There may have been. There may not have been.
Right.
I just saw a video last night on the Gateway Pundit that has a truck driving up to the ballot center in Detroit at 3:30 in the morning. 50 boxes get unloaded. Brand new video. I urge you to go check this out. Brand new video.
Oh,
I don't know if those are ballots. I don't know if there's a reason they should be there or not. But wouldn't it be nice if somebody investigated this? Wouldn't it be nice if a sergeant went down there and said, hey, can you show me the boxes, please? What's in them? What are you doing with them? Maybe the FBI, maybe local police, maybe the state police.
Yeah.
This never happened. It went silent. And it went silent because President Trump was an outsider. And business had turned against him. His establishment, Republicans had turned against him. And they wanted him out because he was draining the swamp. He was exposing Washington and beyond for what it is. And that's a place where only the rich and famous profit. And so, you know, they had enough with President Trump.
Yeah. As soon as he said that he was going to actually fight back, I think that's the thing when people analyze Trump and say, what does it mean to be a Trump Republican? Well, when you look at his issues, he brought a conservative agenda. It wasn't something different. The only thing he added to it was that he was going to fight. He was going to get rid of these people that wanted to block progress or keeping America first. And I tell you what, man, one of the things that was so great to see during the election controversy and people fighting back was actually the rise of your network. I mean, did that take you by surprise? What are people thinking over there come, you know, November, and now all of a sudden people are tuning out and flooding Newsmax? So that's got to be great to see.
Oh, it absolutely was. So, you know, we had started the primetime show, 8 o'clock Eastern time on Newsmax, every cable satellite provider out there, as far as all the free ways you can watch it too. So there's my plug. But we had started in August. I think when we started, they were running reruns in that time slot of stuff during the day. We were doing like 25,000 viewers a night. I had built it to about 125,000, and my sites were on Fox Business that was doing 250,000 a night. If we could just get to the Fox Business numbers, we'd be competitive on the cable market scene, and I would be so proud, and we were headed that way. November 3rd hits, and let me tell you something, the floodgates opened up. We were consistently doing anywhere between 600 and 1 million people a night. Greg Kelly was doing even bigger numbers than that in the 7 o'clock slot. And we've continued to hold some of those numbers. Now they've come down a little bit, but consistently we're doing between 500,000 and 600,000, sometimes 700,000 people a night now. And we're holding those numbers pretty steady. So, you know, people aren't leaving, which is good. The only thing that I do see in TV news right now is I think people are burnt out. And I think there's some evidence that they're just turning off the news altogether. They can't take it anymore. They need a rest. I do believe they're going to be back as they see just the advances of Joe Biden and the advances that he's making on freedom. You're not going to help but have to come and watch and get a battle plan to fight back.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that because we've seen it too with our show. There was this huge buildup and there was just so much energy invested by people, both in President Trump and in the movement itself. And when you come to that realization that, guess what? There's a Biden administration now. I think it just really took the wind out of people's sails so much. I noticed on your show last night, you talked about this Time Magazine article, and it really dove into election fraud and this election law violations. Can you bring people up to speed on that a little bit in case they missed their program? I invite them to tune in if you got it online, but can you bring us up to speed on that?
It's rare that I offer up recommendations to read a Time Magazine article,
Exactly.
But I think this author, Molly Ball, I believe her name is, had an accidental expose of the Democrat Party. Now, she didn't spell out any illegal activities, But what she did spell out was the concerted effort and teaming up of very strange bedfellows. When you had the U.S. Chamber of Commerce teaming up with the AFL-CIO, so here you have titans of industry teaming up with big labor. You have billionaires, social media, and the Democratic Party all working together. You've got people like Zuckerberg inviting faith-based leaders over to his house for dinner. And she spells all this out in her article. And then she talks about how they managed to change election law in states to accept all these mail-in ballots using COVID-19, the Chinese virus, as an excuse to change much of this election law. Well, she goes through it step by step. And, in many respects, the Democrats handed to us on that front. We were not prepared. And I believe the president had the wrong people around him, not his legal team. I love those people. But as far as the fighters go and the people in the back rooms, I'm not sure he had the right people there because they were blindsided by this. The RNC was blindsided by this, but maybe it was willful blindness. That's my biggest fear as you read of where was the fight here after the election. And maybe I say willful blindness because you see what the Republicans have done now since the election and how many of them have turned their back on President Trump. It's a disgrace.
Right. It's really frustrating, man. And it did reveal the people that we need to target or primary or do whatever to keep this fight going, because I think President Trump, in a sense, did open the genie's bottle, and brought other people to say, you know what, I can fight. But it also revealed those who aren't willing to, the Mitch McConnells and everything. They want status quo, business as usual, and we have to keep fighting. Man, I appreciate your time, Grant. I thanks so much. We got to have you back again. But, if people want to tune into you, quick plug, where can they go?
All right. So Newsmax, like I said, every cable satellite provider just about you can imagine, all the streaming devices. And also, if I can, wethepeople.store. I got Stinchfield's Army gear. This is one of the shirts.
Nice.
You get a lot of military throwback stuff, but also some fun things too. So Stinchfield's Army gear, selling merch. I mean, it wouldn't be a great TV appearance if I wasn't plugging something, right, Bobby?
I love it, man. All right. Well, you take care, and we'll have you back real soon.
All right. Good luck, my man. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Grant. All right. That was just awesome, folks. I love talking to Grant. I love being on his show. It was cool for him to come down over here. And I want to thank all you guys. There was a lot of questions coming in. One, I think Sharon asks, I'm catching up on some of the questions that have come in. Where can you watch Newsmax? Well, Newsmax, you can go to newsmax.com. I think they have the link to their live show. Where I usually check it out is just through YouTube. They've got their live stream going all the time. If you miss something, you can scroll back, but they've got an app. You can get it on your phone. You can watch it through Apple TV. All of the stuff. It's always free. You can check it out. Watch Grant. Like I said, he's a friend of mine. And some of these questions, I think Ken brought up willful blindness. I loved that expression because it shows what the Republicans were doing. One of the things that I got so frustrated with in this election cycle and post-election was the unwillingness to fight, the unwillingness to say, hey, what's going on here? Let's get this stuff in front of the courts, in front of the state legislatures, and get something done. I mean, the courts ultimately, I go back to this all the time. All right. If you take outside, don't even consider the ballot stuffing and voting machines and things like that. There were election law violations in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Those ultimately needed to be heard by the Supreme Court, and they punted. If they don't hear it, doesn't mean it's baseless. It doesn't mean that there was no merit at all. They didn't hear it. We need to hear that and get to a judgment. That was what was so frustrating. But part of their reason, not to defend them at all, because as you know, I'm very, very frustrated with that because they should have. But one of their reasons was I think they wanted it to ultimately be heard in the state legislatures. And the state legislatures got weak in the knees. A lot of these were run by Republicans who did not step forward, who admitted, some committees admitted, hey, man, there's election law violations enough to overturn the election. But hey, that initial certification, we're going to go with that. We're not going to do anything about it. This is why people are so frustrated. And one of the reasons that President Trump was so popular is not because he changed conservatism or what we stand for. Because again, if you look at what's going on with taxes and border security and foreign policy and regulations and energy independence, He brought forward a conservative agenda. The thing he added on top of that, the other layer that allowed him to actually expand our base, is he was willing to get things done and fight, to fight against the media, to fight against the left, to fight against the Democrats, and for basic things like voter integrity. This is why our base expanded, because he wasn't going to take getting pushed around, and he fought back. That's what it was all about. That's why they came after President Trump, and why he ultimately lost in the end was because of these nonstop attacks. But I appreciate all of you guys tuning in, and the super chats, folks, those help a lot. As I've mentioned before, everything that comes in from super chat goes right back into the show, whether it's new equipment, whether it's personnel. Beth's doing a great job as producer. Our moderators, they are top notch. We have a lot of fun, but I appreciate all you guys for being here. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in and helping the 13-minute news hour and the Saturday live stream grow. This was a great turnout today, and I really, really appreciate it. But don't let it be your only show. Come back Monday for our regular edition. Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays is a 13-minute news hour. That's every time. You can set your schedule, 11:45 a.m. Central Time, but people are showing up a half hour in advance for the pre-show chat, which reminds me also, after this show, stick around. We've got the post-show chat. So when we wrap up, hit the subscribe button and also chat. It lasts long. It doesn't last super long. You can get on with your day, but then we'll get on with the rest of the show. So we're going to wrap things up. So please subscribe. And when you do, please hit that bell so you'll be notified. And we'll see you next time. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is Saturday Live Stream. Okay, friends, thanks so much for watching. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so you'll be notified. And here's a special video just for you so you can watch even more of the 13-minute news hour. And don't forget to check out GOPUSA.com for the best in conservative news and commentary. We'll see you next time.